Hey guys, I want to show you guys my worm bin today. I've been raising worms in my spare time, kind of as a hobby, and well, I know it's a little unusual, but that's what I'm doing for my garden. I've been gardening the last couple years, and I found out that worm castings are about the best thing you can do for your garden. So I got me some worms, and I started a worm garden, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. It's a kind of a three-tier system here. In the top bin, I have my food bin. This is where I feed them. In the second bin is the compost bin, the finished bin, where the it was originally my first bin, and as it got worked through and completed, then I started the second bin and shredded up a phone book full of paper and wetted it down, moistened it down to the right moisture level, and put it and drilled holes in the bottom and set it up here. And then as the worms wanted to, they go from the finished bin up into the new bin, and that's where I put all the food. So that's where what will entice them out of the bottom bin into this top bin. And the system's worked pretty well. I mean, the top bin has gotten populated, and they've worked the material over into compost and stuff, but the problem is there's still a lot of worms in the finishing bin. So the plan now is to just kind of let this material dry up pretty good in the finishing bin, and as it dries up, the worms like and need moisture in order to survive. So they'll go up to where the moisture's at in the feeding bin. And I really haven't been concentrating much on finishing the finishing bin. Only here in the last week have I really even been deciding to actually finish it up. I've had the two bins going now for, I probably started this top bin 30 days ago, maybe 45 days ago. I probably should write the starting date down whenever I start these bins. I'll have to do that in the future. But so this third bin is just for any liquid, extra liquid. As it, if it were to puddle or anything, the liquid would go through this second bin. There's a screen in the bottom and some holes for it to drain through, and that way all the castings aren't sitting in the water. So the idea is that any extra liquid will drain down into this bottom bucket that don't have any worms in it, and then you can drain it out with this little valve into your bucket and add it to your garden. But I haven't gotten any extra liquid yet, so I'm probably not going to end up needing that part of the system, but I'm always going to leave it there just in case. That way, if it does get a little swampy, it can drain off pretty easy. Let's take a look at the bin itself. This is the feeding bin, and Friday I added about a gallon of shredded paper to this mix. It's we're coming up on winter here. We're fall here in America, and getting close to fall anyway. We've only got a couple months left until it starts getting cold, and although it is heated here in the shop, we only keep it about 45 degrees in the winter time, just to keep things from freezing. So I want to get this material up here built up so that we can keep the worms nice and warm. And right now it's only, maybe 3 inches thick, and I figure if I can double that by October, I'll be good. So by adding a gallon of paper, they'll work through that and increase the increase the casting amount. So this is the food bin. I fed them last Wednesday. I just cut up one of these big cucumbers that I got that kind of got hidden in the garden, and I didn't find it, so it grew too long, and so when they get white like this, they get real bitter. And the worms ain't got no taste buds, I don't think. They don't really care if it's bitter or not, just as long as it ain't acidy. And so I cut one of those just down the middle and put it in here last Wednesday, and it was pretty much gone by Saturday. And so I haven't fed them since Wednesday, except for this morning when I checked the garden. I had a yellow squash that hadn't pollinated, and it had gotten, this is pretty big for an unpollinated squash, but it had gotten pretty big, and then it just started to kind of rot because it never did get pollinated. So I figured the worms would enjoy that, and so I brought it in here. So this is the feeding bin. Now we'll pull it out and take a look at the finished castings bin. Alright, so this is the finished castings bin, and as you can see, there is still plenty of worms. Right now, it's pretty much just a duplex of worms. All of them haven't decided to leave this bin yet. Matter of fact, I think this bin probably has more than the other bin. The other bin's got a lot. It's able to process a lot of material, but this one, I think's got more worms. But you can see the difference in the castings compared to the other one. The other one, of course, has a lot of paper in it, but this one here is just pretty much pure black finished worm castings. You can see it's got sand in it. Worms have to have a little bit of sand with their food. They digest the sand with their food as a way to break up the food, kind of like a gizzard in birds. So you have to add sand or eggshell, some kind of gritty stuff with your worms. And when I add sand, they eat up all the small worm-sized bits of sand, but the bigger stuff that they don't eat is left in the soil, and that helps to aerate the soil, and this kind of keeps it from being clumpy. So the kind of worms that I have here are red wiggler worms. I'm probably going to start some nightcrawler and start a nightcrawler bin. Haven't messed with nightcrawlers yet, but I think I will start a nightcrawler bin, and maybe you can enjoy a nightcrawler bin with me when I start one of those, and how to start a bin from the very beginning. That might be a fun little project. So this is the finished bin. I'm really going to start focusing on baiting these worms up to the top. Right now, this is still the moisture level that the worms like. It's they say if you can squeeze it and get a drop of water between your fingers, then it's the right moisture level. I can't get a handful without getting a bunch of worms, so I'm not going to squeeze my little wormies, but you can tell, you get to where you can just tell by the moisture content if it's good or not. and this is the moisture level that they like. So in order to entice them up, this is going to have to dry out a little bit, and then they'll want to go up to the more moist feeding box. Also, there's just a couple pieces of corn on the cob. I seen a little piece of broccoli still in here, and a little wood bit from the compost that I started the bin with. And so they're still finding things to eat in here, and that will keep them happy enough to stay where they are. So I'll start focusing on getting these guys baited out of this bottom box. And this is deeper than probably most people's worm boxes are. I would say it's a good 7 inches deep. But I've been working this worm bin here for a long time. I'll bet 7 months, 6 months probably, that I've been working this bin and adding to it. And so I think it's time to probably stop working it and harvest it. I have harvested out of this bin for my garden. I just pull a big handful out and then put it under the light, and because the worms dig deep when they get into light, so if you get a big old clump of it and then put the light on it, the worms go down to the very bottom. You can take all the stuff that's on the top and use it. So I've harvested probably 10 times out of here, and then I add more paper, and then they go through the paper and add back to the volume of castings again, and of course with some food and stuff. But so there's a lot to learn about raising worms. They're super easy to raise, but there's just a lot of basics with them. So maybe I'll upload some more more videos of the worms. And if you guys are interested, leave a comment, and maybe I'll start a new worm bin for you guys or something, so you can see how it's done from the beginning. As I've done this, I've learned a lot of secrets, a lot of do's and don'ts, and probably good information to pass along. So maybe I'll continue making some videos about these worms. If I do, I'll get a better camera system instead of this phone, because trying to film this stuff while holding the phone is a little challenging. So I brought this stuff up to feed them. That's all cuttings from the garden. It's season now for Brussels sprouts to be clipped. Brussels sprouts, as you grow them, they grow with these great big old leaves, and when it about the fall time, then the Brussels sprouts start to sprout right in between the leaf and the stalk. Once that starts to happen, you have to cut all the leaves off the Brussels sprout plant. And so I have a bazillion of these leaves, and so I'm going to cut them up. And I try to cut them up into about the same size of pieces as my shredder shreds paper. That allows the worms to get through it quicker, and the less time that green foods can stay in the bin before being turned to dirt, the better off. Because as the food rots, it creates acid and stench, and the worms can't handle acid very good. So the quicker they can get through the food, the better for your bin. So my rule of thumb when feeding my worms is I'll feed them about what they can eat in 3 days, and then I make sure and wait 5 days before giving them any food. That allows them to get through all the food and get through the bedding material, and really just make sure everything is worked over real good before I add more food to the bin. So that's my rule of thumb. Sometimes when I get a big mess of stuff out of the garden, like these Brussels sprout leaves, I'll add 5 days worth or so and then wait 7 days to feed again. But typically my rule of thumb is 3 days, whatever they can eat in 3 days, and then I'll wait 5 days to feed them. And that keeps my bin nice and keeps my bin from getting too soggy and keeps it from getting stinky. What else? I can't think of anything else to say about the worm garden right now. If you got any questions, leave it below, and I'll try to answer it. If watching videos about my little worm garden is something you're interested in, leave a comment below. Otherwise, I'll see you on the next one.